Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here on this absolutely beautiful, somewhat hot day. My name is Tracy Jeffers, and I am the Associate Executive Director here at Riverwood's Exeter. And I'd just like to thank everybody for coming. We have so many Riverwoods residents that have shown up, and wonderful community members as well. This is the second year that we've been able to work with the Exeter Chamber and host our space here at Riverwoods and share it with you. So we're really excited to have the Chamber here, as well as Governor Sununu. So I'd like to hand it off now to Renee from the Chamber.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm just going to do a few thank yous and give you some more information about how this is going to proceed today, and then we will have the governor introduced. So welcome, obviously. We'd like to thank Riverwoods and Tracy and her staff for hosting us again this year, the second year. We'd also like to thank Cambridge Trust for supporting us and underwriting this event again. All of you for taking your time to come here today. I'd also like to thank Exeter TV for being here today. Gabe, thank you. And also Akil from Seacoast Media, thank you for being here. And of course, the governor and his staff. We're very happy to have him here again this year. The governor will come up, so I'll just give you some details. He will come up in a few minutes after being introduced. He will speak and share some information with you, and then we will open it up to to questions afterwards. When we have the question space and time, we will walk around with a microphone, and anyone who wants to have a question answered, you can just raise your hand and we will take care of that for you. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Rachel Ella, from the Vice President, Premier Client Group with Cambridge Trust.
Good morning, everyone. So nice to be here with you, and thank you to our hosts at Riverwoods. It's always so nice to be here in this space with your residents. Cambridge Trust has supported important events like this with the Chamber for many years, and as we move forward with our merger with Eastern Bank this weekend, I know and am confident that we'll continue these important partnerships. Community is incredibly foundational to how both banks run their business. And I do want to share that the Cambridge Trust brand is not going away. You'll continue to see it in our communities under the wealth management and private banking services, while we welcome more Eastern branches into our communities. So now I'd like to go ahead and introduce our governor. This is actually a smaller bio. There's lots of impressive things to share about our governor. Chris Sununu is the 82nd governor of the state of New Hampshire and is currently serving his 4th term. Governor Sununu has delivered 3 balanced state budgets with no new taxes. In fact, his 3rd budget cuts and phases out the interest and dividends tax for retirees, provides tax relief to employers and small businesses, reduces property taxes by $100 million, delivers voluntary paid medical leave, spends more money per pupil for public education than ever before. Today, the Granite State is the fastest growing state in the Northeast, has one of the lowest unemployment rates in the nation, and the lowest child poverty rate of any state in America. Chris grew up in Salem, New Hampshire. He graduated from Massachusetts Institute of Technology with a BS in Civil Environmental Engineering. As an environmental engineer, Chris worked for 10 years cleaning up hazardous waste sites across the country. In 1998, Chris completed a 5-month through hike of the Appalachian Trail from Maine to Georgia. Governor Sununu lives in Newfields with his wife Valerie and their 3 children. Please welcome Governor Sununu.
I'm like double mic. There we go. Morning. Morning. Good to see everybody. I can't tell if the crowd's getting bigger or smaller as the years go on. It's great to be here. So, thank you very much, obviously, to Cambridge Trust, my bank, by the way. A little bummed that it's becoming Eastern, but that's a whole different story. Do I need to stand over here? The mic is following me wherever I go, so maybe we'll do one of those. I'm not sure how to do it. So what I thought I would do, a little bit of a state of the state, like where we are, what's happening in the state. Obviously there's a lot of attention on politics right now with the presidential race and all that sort of thing. And then really just open up for questions. I'm a big believer in questions. If you're asking a question of the governor, my sense is it's probably pretty important or pretty much on your mind. So happy to talk about whatever you want, whether it's what's happening in the state, what's happening locally, politically, because there's going to be a lot of races, right? We have our 400 state reps, the 24 senators, they're all running again. There is an open seat for governor. That's going to be a pretty intense race. And then, as we've all discussed, you might have heard there's a presidential race going on. And that is crazy right now. It really is. And no one is exactly sure where that's going to go, which is exciting, actually, right? If we knew who was going to win all of these races, it would be incredibly boring. People wouldn't even bother going out to vote. But all these races are close. All these races can swing either way. No one knows what's going to happen. The beauty of that is it probably means a lot of people are going to come out and vote one way or the other, right? Which is really what you want at the end of the day. If you want to ensure democracy is secured, this is it, right? Making sure people get out to vote is one of the most important things you can do. And I always tell people all the time, you know, on the presidential side, sure, I'm going to vote for Trump. I don't care who you vote for. I don't care who you vote for, but vote. Don't sit home and don't not vote. I think that's one of the worst things you can actually do. Okay, New Hampshire, we're awesome. We're doing really well. There's no question about that. New Hampshire's in great shape, especially here in the Northeast. There's no doubt we are like truly leading the charge in the Northeast. A lot of other ways, and I was, of course, I'm the governor, so I'm always going to start, and thank you for that great introduction, by bragging on some of our great rankings, because we're not just pretty good in some areas, and I think in some key areas, we are literally the gold standard. We are literally the best in the country. A report came out last week when it comes to overall child well-being, and they look at like 100 different categories in terms of child health, child poverty, how we deal with abuse, how we deal with all these different issues around kids. We are number one in the country. And for me, that's what it's all about. And I think for a lot of us, right? It's cliche as a politician to say it's all about the kids, but it is, right? This isn't about us. This is about what we're doing for that next generation, all the opportunities we're trying to create for that next generation. Whether it's setting up a solid mental health system, so if kids are in crisis or someone's in crisis, there's a system that they can rely on. Or making sure that there's housing, because we want to make sure that they have a job, and if you don't have a place to live, you're not going to be, working there. And if you're not working there, the whole system falls apart. So making sure that there's a pathway to housing. But it's always really for that next generation coming up. I'm 49. I'm like, is this what happens? Did everyone get to 49 and say, I'm going to stay 49 forever? Because I'm not going to 50. You know what the funny part is? You know what my 50th birthday is? It's election day. It's November 5th, 2024. I always thought if I ran for president, that would be funny, just to be elected, to be elected president on my 50th. But so I'm kind of perpetually there. But I really am at a point where I have kids. I have an 11-year-old, an 18, and a 19-year-old now. So just as a dad, right, I look at a lot of the stuff that we're doing in terms of a dad, whether it's education or all these other systems that have to be there. At the end of the day, again, just to talk about some of these, the rankings that I'm most proud of, in education, one of the best education systems in the country, the lowest poverty rate in the country, one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country. These are all, wonderful things, but you gotta make sure that whatever you're doing is lasting. If you do anything and it's only good for when you're there, right, you gotta create, I don't want to call it legacy, but you gotta create systems that even depending on where the economics might go, whether we hit a recession or not, what happens with our demographics and population, that the systems will be resilient. They're not just reliant on one-time funding. That's the worst thing you can do. That they actually have perpetuity. And hopefully, you've created a system that, again, where economically things are strong, so things can be funded, but you need people too, right? I mean, the biggest problem our fellow neighbors in New England are having is they are losing population. We're not, but they are. That's not a good thing. You can have the best idea in the world, you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have the people to actually do the service, perform the work, right? It's not going to work. You can have the best schools in the country, but if you don't have the teachers, right, what's going on? So you got to make sure that all the different pieces of the system are working. For me, in terms of government, it actually all starts with business. If the economy is strong, if your economy is going well, if you're balancing your budgets, if you're being fiscally disciplined, if you're being tight with how you're spending money, you're spending it on needs and not wants, you're not wasting it, then you have all the other opportunities to invest in a mental health system, to invest in the opioid drug crisis that we have, to invest in new programs, to try new things. And we've been very fortunate, I'll say, and frankly, very good in that way. And it's not just me, right? Everything is a team effort. I'm blessed with a great team. I am blessed with a great team. I get all the criticism, I get all the credit, but at the end of the day, one thing I will say that I'll pat myself on the back a little bit. One thing I'm good at, if you're going to give me credit for anything, is I really do believe in surrounding yourself with good people. The legislature's been very good to work with. Democrats have run the legislature during my time. Republicans have run the legislature during my time. We always find a way to make it work. But as long as the economy is strong, I keep cutting business taxes. There's a reason. I want businesses to come in. If businesses are coming in and they don't have high costs or high taxes, they can invest in their employees. That's why we have some of the highest, I think we're ranked number 4 or 5 in the country for the highest average wages in the country. Not because the government says so, because we create a really free, open market. We want businesses to have a lot of flexibility to do what they do here. They're not burdened by regulation. Like most of the cost in a business is the regulatory cost that you and I actually never really see, but those regulatory costs translate to higher costs for the individual, or frankly, less employees because they can't afford them, or less wages for the employees. So my whole point is when business does well, the state, that's the bulk of our taxes that we collect, the state does well. When the state does well, we can invest in new ways of doing it. Well, the housing is the big one, right? So a lot of folks are talking about housing. We created, for the first time ever, we did the Invest in H program, which is $100 million for multifamily housing, for that next generation of housing. Remember starter homes? There's no such thing as a starter home anymore. It's terrible. I wish there was. Right? Maybe there's a small condo, but right now starter homes are really apartments, right? Multi-family unit apartments. And they're not apartments of the 70s and 80s. They're really nice. I mean, we created a program where all these small towns in the state, right? You don't want all the apartments in just Manchester or just Concord, right? You want every town participating. You want Exeter and Greenland and all the towns participating. It could be 4 units here and 7 units there, and 3 units there. But when you start adding that up across all the different towns, if they're willing to participate, then it really makes a difference. The challenge we have on housing is that local control. I love local control, by the way. But the downside of it is a lot of towns just don't want to put in multifamily housing. They're kind of old school thinking. And so they don't permit it, they don't zone it. That's been one of the challenges that we've had. But we've made a lot of progress. But we're the only state growing in population right now, so we have a high demand, which is ultimately a very good thing. The other issue I want to touch upon a little bit, because the 2 big issues that I think will be lasting in terms of a constant challenge that we're constantly having to work with is mental health, big issue of mental health, and the opioid crisis. So we've made some big investments in mental health. And again, I try to, one thing my piece of advice as I walk out the doors after my 8 years as governor, never give a politician credit for spending money. I see so many politicians go, we spent this much money on this and this much money on that. Okay, what was the result, right? You want a result for the dollars spent. Don't just let politicians get credit for spending more money into a system. If you spend more money into a system but you still have the same crisis, what have we achieved, right? So for example, with the mental health crisis, we're making ground because I think we're spending it in the right way. For example, we're building 3 new hospitals, right? We're not just spending big money, we're actually building beds. Right, we have a private hospital that's going in the greater Manchester area, a new forensic hospital, and an expansion of the New Hampshire Mental Health Hospital in Concord. We bought Hampstead Hospital, which is just for kids, which is great. Kind of a bumpy start there, but it's great because it's just for kids and high acuity issues with children. Before they had to go to the New Hampshire Hospital, which is really designed for adults. But now we have a place for kids here with those special acuities. Those are investments we're making. Also with mental health, I'm a big believer. Community-based mental health is the answer. If everyone that has a mental health issue for varying degrees, they all had to go to Concord to get or all had to go to just a single hospital to get care, that's a failed system. You don't want that. You want community-based care. You want care where people can go somewhere locally, where folks that they know, right? A lot of the mental health care, the majority of the mental health care you need isn't in a hospital. It is seeing somebody once a week, being able to pick up the phone, telemedicine, whatever it might be. So the connectivity to the care, I believe, really gets the best care. You're more apt to go get a service if you have connection, especially if you're a kid. No parent is going to drive their kid 100 miles necessarily, or we should be asking them to drive their kids 100 miles for quality services. So we're kind of, I would say not divesting, redistributing a lot of the money from a centralized approach to localized approaches, which I think has a lot of opportunity. Same type of strategy when it comes to the opioid crisis. When I became governor, we were like number 2 in the country for opioid deaths. It was awful. Tip of the spear. You know, we were always on the news for being the state with the worst crisis, right? Now, we've changed our system drastically. We created the doorway, again, more community-based services. I think in the last 7 years, the country has spiked 60%, 67, 69%, something like that, in opioid deaths. We've gone down. Now, we're still going to lose probably somewhere 350 to 400 people will probably die of a fentanyl or drug-related death in this state this year. Still way too many, right? 350 to 400, too many. But we're bucking the national trend. The country's doing this. We're actually bringing our numbers down. Why? Because we created a whole new system. We don't do it like we used to do it. Right? Too often we just spend money into old systems. And if you're spending money in a system that isn't working, you're pushing harder, but you're pushing harder in the wrong direction, right? Sometimes you gotta have the courage to say, we're gonna whiteboard this thing out and take something in a whole new direction, a whole new approach. And we did that, and it's getting results, which is great. But you don't want to take your eye off the ball. We want to create a system that, again, that's lasting, that can be kind of self-perpetuating, find efficiencies within it, keep working out the kinks. And we've done that over the past few years. The main reason, people always ask me why I ran for a 4th term. The main reason I ran for the 4th term is because we had created a whole new mental health system. Not created, we started taking a different approach to the mental health system, I'll say. We did create a whole new system for the opioid and drug crisis, but they were only there for a couple of years. And then COVID hit, right? I wanted to really make sure that from a management standpoint, these things took roots. Now, you can plant a seed and it takes some roots and the grass grows a little bit, but it really takes a couple years for that to really get in there, if you will, to make sure that it's going to be lasting. Well, look, what else do you want to talk about? I'll talk, you see, I'm trying to be careful because I'll go on all day. I'm number 7 of 8 kids, as a lot of you know, so once I start talking, I never shut up. When you're a kid, you want to, like, if anyone paid attention to me as a kid, I was like, okay, I got their attention, and I never stopped. So, look, I don't want to say everything is fine and dandy. I think we're going to have a recession in this country. It is definitely coming, right? The federal government has spent so much money, and inflation has gotten so high. The inflation has come down, but prices don't go down when inflation comes down. There's this thinking, oh, well, inflation's down, so prices are down. They're not. Prices just aren't skyrocketing at 10 or 15% a year like they were. Now they're only going up 3, 4, 5% a year, but they're still going up, right? And that's because all this federal money is out there. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of the federal money was designed, all this stimulus that came out, it was designed to be spent not in 2023 and 2024, but also 2025 and 2026. The cash is going to keep coming out. I still have, of the ARPA money, if you've heard that term ARPA, that's the federal money that the state got, we've allocated most all of that money to someone. But some of those projects won't actually come to fruition maybe till next year. It's a construction project, we're going to build in the parks, or we're going to do something. So we have that cash. If you looked at the state bank account right now, you'd be like, holy cow, that's a lot of money. And it is. We have more cash in our bank account than we've ever had before, for a variety of reasons. But a portion of it is because I'm effectively holding on to the federal money, waiting for that construction project to come, and then we pay them at the end of the project. But that won't happen for a couple of years. The reason I bring that up is the state, this federal money is going to keep coming out. It's not done yet. And that's a problem. That's going to keep inflation high. That's going to keep costs high. Cost of labor, cost of going to the store and buying eggs or meat or whatever you want. Then you had all the regulatory problems coming out of Washington. That creates cost too. So inflation, unfortunately, is going to be here for a little while. But then the money dries up, and it's drying up. Then we have a real problem. Then you have high prices, but you don't have all this extra federal money coming into the system because we have $32 trillion in debt, right? And the government doesn't have any debt, by the way. You have it, I have it, our kids have it, right? The people hold the debt, not the government. They're just bad managers, if you think of it that way. So we owe a lot of money here. So the government can't just keep printing money. That's gonna really stop. You're going to see, I don't wanna say a car crash, but a real slowdown in the economy. That's what makes me the most nervous coming forward, which is why we build up our rainy day fund, our savings, which is why we have a record low amount of debt. I've made sure we've paid our debt down in the state pretty well. We only have about 2/3 of the debt from when I originally became governor. That's good. That gives us some flexibility. Our bond rating is higher. It's a technical thing that allows us to borrow money if we had to at a very low rate. So financially, we're in better shape than everybody else. My job, if there's a recession in this country, I want to make sure we're the last ones in and the first ones out, right? I want to make sure it hits us the least, because that gives you opportunity. That gives us flexibility. That keeps the jobs going. That keeps employment strong. That keeps the system working the way it should. All these other states, not all though. Massachusetts is tough. You know, I make fun of Massachusetts. I pick on Massachusetts a lot. But I do it, I really do it because I love Massachusetts. I really do. I love New England. We want all of the New England states to be strong. We need, Boston's an economic driver. We need Boston to be strong. It ain't going well. It's really not in Massachusetts right now. The homelessness crisis, the immigration crisis, terrible fiscal management. Businesses leaving Boston. The main reason all these businesses are coming north is because, for the most part, they're coming out of New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts, which is great. We'll take the business. Now Maine, we got I just had got word, we have a huge manufacturer in Maine. It's coming over here. So, but it's New England, right? We're all kind of in it together. Even though our politics might differ a little bit, we need the rest of the states to be strong. So I tease Massachusetts a lot in the hopes that they get the message and start, I'm not saying become more like New Hampshire, but it wouldn't hurt. I'm just saying. But we really do it right here, not because of Chris Sununu, really. It's because I think we all take a little bit of that live free or die thing very seriously. It's not a fun motto. It's about the individual. It's not about the government, right? I always say this, and some people don't like it, but I'm not here to solve your problems. Government is not here to solve problems, guys. We are here to create opportunity. Right? So in mental health, my job is to say, here's the answer, the mental health answer for you and your child. I don't know your story. I don't know your answer. I don't know your path. But what I want to do is create so many doors of opportunity, all these different paths for you. And then you do you. You pick the path that's best for you, not me. Right? That's good government. Same with the opioid crisis. Same with education. With education, we have some of the best public schools in the country. I came up in the public schools here. They are awesome. They're not for everybody though. That's okay. So I created other paths, whether it's the ESA school choice program, whether it's our new opportunities to get your associate's degree for free here in New Hampshire. You get an associate's degree for free as a high school senior. It doesn't cost you or the system any more money. You can take those community college classes and get a degree for free here. And we're not paying for it. All we're doing is we're taking the cost of your senior year and splitting it, letting you go one extra year for 2 years of college. And you do that right. It's a really, really cool way to do it, because high school is twice as expensive as community college. And we realized, we did the math. We said, oh wait, why don't we take that $15,000 a year for the senior year, split it up, and let seniors take 2 years to get their associate's degree. It's the same amount of money. So we just try to be creative about how we allow the dollars to move that best fits your needs. Because what I try to tell everybody in Concord is, sometimes people want to pass a bill. Oh, I met a guy who has a problem, so I'm going to pass a bill to fix his problem. I said, well, oh, wait a minute. When we pass bills, they affect 1.4 million people, not just one, right? So you got to do it for the opportunity of everybody, not just. Sometimes it makes sense. You say, oh, well, that bill would definitely help that guy. But what's a negative repercussion potentially to the system for everybody else? So you got to think globally like that sometimes. And the best way to do it is just think in terms of opportunity, not solving one individual or one business's problem. Okay, let's do questions. And anything you want. We can talk politics, the Celtics, Patriots. Opening days in 9 weeks for the New England Patriots, so that's exciting. But whatever you guys want.
Okay, we're going to start back here.
Governor, I hear you talking about creating opportunity, and I love that thought process with government. little background. I'm a financial advisor,
Mhm.
and I'm also the president of the Exeter Area General Federation of Women.
Mhm.
So as a financial advisor, I strongly believe in personal wealth being built through home ownership. And as a service-oriented, community-based nonprofit, I deeply believe in volunteerism. So I see these apartments being built in an effort to handle the swell of the population. However, I see the impact of not having those starter homes and seeing young people not be able to entrench into our communities. The incentives are for apartments, which give opportunity to developers, and not all of them are from New Hampshire, but some are from Massachusetts and others in the country. Where's the opportunity for our young people in housing? And
Yeah.
when will starter homes be back?
Be back? Well, so again, I would love if starter homes came back. It's completely market driven. So a starter home right now, to actually get somebody to build a small 1,200 square foot, you won't do single level because there's no market for single level, right? We're not gonna do ranch homes anymore. That would be a terrible idea, there's no market. So a 1,200 square foot, 2-level, that's a condo, really. Or if you wanted to do a single starter home, the land itself is too much. Young people can't afford it. So inflation, right? And I am gonna by the way, inflation is created by one thing. The government creates and spends too much money. That's all, the federal government prints too much money. That's all that creates inflation. So bad policies out of DC, and you bet I'm gonna blame DC on this, have created an inflationary cost where a developer will not build, I wish they would, a 1,200 square foot home or even a 1,200 square foot condo that's under $350,000, $400,000, right? So that's just the nature of it, of the inflationary cost to build and the land cost, because land is valuable. So I guess when I created the Invest in H program, we focus on multifamily housing because our apartment in New Hampshire, our apartment vacancy rate at the time was under 1%. It's about 1% now. That's really low. That means virtually every apartment is filled. That's where the market is. And what I tried to appreciate is, and the feedback I got was, okay, Gov, you're 49, you're an old man now. 23-year-olds, they want a whole different dynamic. So while the Invest in H program was created to respond to the market demand that we were seeing from young people, which is mostly apartments and the demand in the community. So I would love starter homes to come back. I would love condos to come, to be stronger. But every condo that's built in the state right now is going for $750,000 minimum. It's crazy. Like no young person could afford that. So what I'm trying to attract is the young people. We have plenty of older, wealthy individuals, especially up in the Lakes area or out at Sunapee or whatever it is. I want those young families, those 22, really not even it's funny, I don't compete for the 23, 24, and 25-year-olds. At that age, those kids, I call them kids, those young adults, they want to live in a city, they want a cultural experience. It's a very different dynamic. They're willing to spend and not save and not put in the equity. It's just what they look at. So when we look at who we're trying to attract, it's really the 27 to 37-year-olds. And we've been fairly successful with it. And right now, I think a lot of them are looking for the starter homes, but the demand right now was more in the multifamily. If we wanted to create some type of fund for young, for not the multifamily, but for our starter home, that would be fine. But I think the dynamics of that are hard just because it's so hard to build if you wanted an individual lot or an expensive condo, even 1,200 square feet to own. It's really hard. And then you add interest rates, right? A starter home, I mean, when inflation, interest rates are high because of inflation. So the interest rates actually have to outpace inflation for it to start coming down. And so no young family wants to go borrow at 7 or 8%, depending on how much you're putting down. So that's one of the challenges. I think inflation has to come down. Those costs have to get under control before you're looking at more young equity investments in housing, I think. But it should be market driven, not government driven.
Not going to talk about housing, Governor. Done a good job. No. I think, in my perception, driving around the state, one of the biggest challenges for the next governor, and I'd be interested to know what your thoughts and what you plan to do, is the homeless or unhoused population, which is really everywhere. I don't think it matters probably what town you're in or what city you're in. Obviously, places like Manchester and Concord is particularly pronounced. But how do you solve that problem? I mean, you talk about more mental health facilities, and that's great, but a lot of the the people that are unhoused don't want to be housed.
That's right.
I think. So to me, that's going to be one of the biggest challenges for the next governor.
Yeah. So a couple things. I mean, we do have one of the lowest homelessness populations and the lowest poverty rate in the country. That's all a good thing. But to your point, I mean, it's not like, God forbid, you go out to California. It's just it's sad. I mean, San Francisco, LA, it's just it's become such sad places. But anyway, here in New Hampshire, two things. Number one, there was a new rule, and the court said we can finally move the encampments away. See, for a while there was effectively a federal law. There were laws, I should say, in place that allowed all these encampments, these tent cities, to be everywhere. And they said, you can't move them, right? And finally the court said, no, of course you can move them. So when you're allowing those encampments to happen, there's no incentive. They can live in a tent for free or whatever, and there's no incentive to go into the shelter. And from the shelter is the key, because that's where you get services. About 8 out of 10, that's a last year number, I'm assuming it's about the same. About 8 out of 10 homeless people right now deal with some form of mental health issue. Doesn't mean that all homeless people have mental health issues, but about 8 out of 10. So the key there is services, right? It could be social services, it could be medication, it could be a variety of things. So if they're not in the shelters, if they're not in the system, so to say, we can't help them and we can't incentivize them to get those kinds of services to get back on their feet, better opportunity for themselves and their family and all that sort of thing. We have jobs. Jobs is not the issue. We got so many jobs. We got lowest unemployment around, so jobs is not the issue. We have opportunity. To your point, it shouldn't just be a Manchester and Concord issue or a Manchester and Nashua issue. Some cities have dealt with it better. I think historically Manchester was in a tough position. I don't mind telling you the new mayor of Manchester, I think, has the absolute right approach. And he's working side by side with the mental health agencies, with law enforcement, with the shelters to say, okay, let's wrap our arms around this issue and tackle it. And I think they're doing actually a very good job. So the biggest, and I'm going to go back to inflation. The biggest problem with inflation is this. All the money that comes into the system, it's making wealthy people very wealthy. And it's making lower income people stuck down here. It's really eroding that middle class. So if you are on a lower income, if you're homeless, maybe you're dealing with a mental health issue, the ability to move up is really hard. And that's an inflationary problem, believe it or not. Because we can handle, most folks in this room, and most of us can handle paying 20% more for eggs. It stinks. We've got to make some other cuts in other areas, but we can do it. A low-income family gets crushed. Inflation is the worst tax on the poor you can possibly create. And that's why I get so crazy about it, because it's government created. It's completely manageable. But bad policies tax the poor with inflation. They can't afford 20% more for eggs. They can't afford an extra $100 for rent or whatever it is. So getting inflation under control is a big part of this. And getting a more, not bifurcated, but a better spectrum of opportunity is another. I think we do it really well here. I think that's why we have one of the lowest homeless populations around. It's still high. It's still high. And then there's veterans. Let's not forget. I mean, I'm also a big believer in focusing on veterans. We have somewhere, we count them. We actually go, if they're living in the woods or living in encampments, we go count everybody in this state. We look for homeless people. We count them. We try our best to keep track of everybody. On the veteran side, I think the latest number I saw was about 80 veterans right now in this state are homeless. Look, out of 1.4 million people, 80 doesn't sound like a lot. But that's too many, because we have a lot of places, a lot of shelter space specifically for veterans. And to your point, for a variety of reasons, they don't want to come in. Maybe they don't want to get sober. Because a lot of these shelters, you have to be sober. You can't come in on drugs. You can't come in drinking, especially if they're family, right? So that's one of the barriers there is, again, creating opportunities for people to either deal with the drug issues or the mental health issues, incentivize them into the shelters to get them that next step of opportunity. Hopefully, as inflation comes down, you also have a spectrum where they have a step of opportunity. It isn't just the haves and the have-nots, which is really terrible.
Hi. Thank you for governing us so well and with such care. We really
We try.
appreciate it. I'm wondering what your opinion of artificial intelligence is and whether or not you use it.
Yeah. She said artificial intelligence. And no AI is going to prevent me from spilling Costco over my stomach. It's concerning. So artificial intelligence is a wonderful opportunity. and will create a lot of opportunities, but it has to be controlled. So the areas of opportunity will most specifically be in healthcare. I'm gonna get a little wonky for a second. In the past year, what used to take a PhD student maybe 4 to 7 years to map out the structure of a protein, because that's really important when you're creating pharmaceuticals or figuring out Alzheimer's or figuring out some of the cancers, artificial intelligence can do in about 20 days, right? So the speed at which we can use data to get these computers to solve real problems is awesome. I believe in my lifetime we're going to have some cancers cured, like a true cure for cancer. And that's because of AI. That's amazing. That's really exciting stuff. But we all know where it can go. And it sounds like 5 years ago, talking like this, I would have thought I was nuts. But the fact of the matter is, can AI start thinking for itself? Can AI work against us? Potentially and probably at some point. So you got to keep that in the box. I will say this, I think the government, the one thing the federal government has done pretty well, starting about 2 years ago, is start bringing experts into Congress and saying, what are we dealing with? How far can this thing go? So I think everyone is trying to figure it out to create the ethical guidelines and the regulatory guidelines to allow AI to go. But here's the problem. There's going to be a lot of nefarious people using AI for a lot of nefarious things. They already are. So the threat is going to be, I think, mostly in scams, threats to your finances in the bank, right? They can use AI to decrypt and decode your passwords, things of that nature. That'll be the most immediate threat in the next few years. Will it advance beyond that? I have no doubt. Maybe cyber threats to, we spend a lot of time protecting our water, our electricity, our utilities because of cyber attacks. Those are, every single day the state gets hit with about 2 million cyber attacks. 2 million a day. And I actually have there's a screen and a place in Concord where you can see there's a dot that pings on the screen every time there's a cyber attack on our system. Because what these guys are doing, it isn't one person hitting enter at a keyboard, I'm attacking the state of New Hampshire. They create what they call bots, which is basically inside the computer, hitting our system many different ways, many different pathways, sometimes multiple times a second. And then you add that across the world, because anytime they can get into your system, they now have access to your data, ransomware, they can lock you out, the whole thing. And we spend, you and your taxpayer dollars spend a lot of money holding them at bay. And we've done pretty good at it so far. So I think that's really where the most immediate threats in the future are going to be. But it's real. It comes with great opportunity. And we should be concerned about it. The good news is I think we are. There's always going to be something that slips through, but I don't give federal government a lot of credit often, but I will say I think they are taking it very seriously and trying to at least create the guidelines. What's going to happen is big companies, they can make huge investments in AI. Amazon, Walmart, they're making giant investments in AI to better understand your buying opportunities, what your tendencies are. What I think the problem is the little guys, the local retailer down here on Water Street, probably not using AI to figure out so there's going to be an efficiency that the big companies have in terms of buying power, selling power, commerce, that the little guys won't for a while. So I think you're going to see a little bit of a bifurcation economically that way as well, which is interesting. It'll all work out. The sun will come up tomorrow, I swear, I promise. And that's one thing I tell people, no matter how bad the challenges seem, I swear, I promise, one thing as a politician, I will promise you, the sun will come up tomorrow. Every day's a new day. I don't think the world's going to be taken over by robots just yet. We'll leave that for maybe 2 generations away. So.
Question over here.
Thank you, Governor Sununu. You mentioned a desire to attract and welcome young people to the state. And my question is, will you commit? Closer? Okay. Will you commit to supporting a person's autonomy over their own body, including access to safe, legal abortion care?
Sure, yeah, look, so when it comes to abortion, yeah, our laws are terrific in the state. Our laws are absolutely terrific in the state. I think our laws are pretty much the same as Massachusetts and New York. I don't want to say what I think doesn't matter anymore, but kind of doesn't, right? In 6 months I'm gone. But I believe all the candidates on both the Republican and Democrat side for governor have said, we're not looking to change any laws. We're not looking to change any laws. No one has been denied reproductive care in this state. No one has been denied an abortion. You saw all those ads against me years ago. Sununu, if you vote for Sununu, people won't have access to reproductive rights and critical care for women and all that. No. Find me one person in the state that's been denied access. Zero. Right? It's a lot of fear-mongering out there. We're good. We're in a great place in the state, and as far as I can tell, and I've heard very directly from all the candidates in both parties, no one's looking to change those laws. So we're good.
Governor, I have a question from Brendan Madden. This is Brendan here. He asked me to read the question. So here it is. I am aware there is a bill, HB 1117, that passed through a while back relative to creating a committee to study the protection of business operators against requests to accommodate customers with fraudulent or untrained service animals. And it went to interim study back in March.
Yep.
My question is two parts. The committee is supposed to have 3 House representatives, 3 senators. What about people from service dog organizations, trainers or owners? And when do you think this committee will be formed?
Great question. So a couple things. So did it go to interim study? So if it went to interim study, I don't know if that means it doesn't come to my desk. If it created a committee, then that would come to my desk, would sign it. The legislature, it really would be up to the Senate President and the House Speaker to put those folks on. That usually happens in the summer. They'll usually find folks in July or August. We created 70 new commissions this year. It's too many for me. But that being said, they have to basically take July, August, and September to find folks to fill those committees. And if any of you are interested in any of these commissions, committees, anything at the state level, I really encourage you, talk to your state senator, your state rep, let them know you're interested. If there's an opportunity, they would gladly put you on. I have commissions that I've had a hard time finding people to serve. Or someone says, I want to serve on this commission, and they show up to like 1 meeting. But then there's not a quorum, and you can't take a vote if people don't show up, right? So I think it's great if we can get more people involved. And if you're interested, definitely let your rep or senator know. And it'll probably happen in July and August. Sometimes I get a person or two that I get to put on as the governor, but the legislative committees are usually just with the legislature. But everyone's a little different, but I think it's great. And I don't know that bill, I couldn't find out whether that bill's coming to my desk or not. Interim study means they kind of held it up, but a committee might have ultimately passed. Sometimes bills get killed, when they get put to interim study, it's a code word for ignoring it, but then they take the good pieces out of that bill and put it in another bill. So I'd have to find out whether that's coming or not. Here's another one for you, I'm gonna drop it. All these bills passed the House and Senate in June, mid-June, no, late May, early June, first week in June, they left, they were done. I still have bills that aren't on my desk. The bills don't come and just sit on my desk after they pass them. People think there's a bill on your desk. I'm like, I swear to God, it's not on my desk. Every bill on my desk, once a bill hits my desk, I only have about 3 or 4, technically 5, but I try to sign or veto every bill in 3 days. So there's no bills sitting on my desk. It's called enrollment. It's this mysterious black box in the legislative process. After they pass a bill, it goes to enrollment. They make sure it's not conflicting with any laws. They put in the commas where the commas have to be. I've waited until August sometimes to get bills on my desk. I can't tell you exactly why. They just come when they come. Last week I literally got a stack of 80 bills in a day. Boom. Those are on my desk. And then we're cranking through them. It was a busy week. And we're cranking through them and doing what we need to do. So we try to do our homework. But I just want folks to know, hey, there's a bill on your desk. Sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. I think the rumor is, Trevor, how many do you think we have? Like 100, 200 left?
Yeah, probably.
About 200 bills are still supposedly sitting out there that I'm just waiting for. So, but I'm happy to look into that.
Good morning.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Sarah Abramson, and I'm the leader of C10, which is a local nuclear safety nonprofit.
Oh.
And I think that the Seacoast is highly relevant, the presence of Seabrook Station, the nuclear power plant. And things that a lot of members of the public come to me about with concerns is climate change and a lot of the frequent and severe flooding that we've been seeing in the winter. And for thousands of residents in the beach areas in particular, if there had been an emergency at the plant and a need to evacuate that would have been impossible for them. And I think so, a lot of people are wondering what types of road infrastructure and other types of investments are going to be made, and if there will be a priority on the seacoast, particularly those communities that may be evacuated. And then a second part to that is you might be aware that the owners of Seabrook Station Exeter are trying to obtain waivers to make cuts to their emergency response resources that are below what is federally required. And what are your thoughts on those cuts, and would you support preserving public safety?
Yeah, sure. So a couple things there. So let's talk about road infrastructure first. So we have wonderful roads in New Hampshire, and the proof is this: drive on a road in New Hampshire and then drive into Massachusetts. Tell me how to do that. I'm serious. So, but to your point, we've had some issues specifically on the seacoast. Northampton, we had some wave erosion. I mean, that was really bad. I think they're finally fixing it now. So when there are issues, Route 1A is a big, Route 1A goes right up the seacoast, right? Massive reconstruction project on Route 1A. The engineering is being done now. I think they're starting the process. That will all be done. It's gonna, I wouldn't go to Hampton Beach in the next couple of years. No, I'm just kidding. It's going to be a lot of traffic. The road will literally take a couple of years to fix. So when the water comes up and over onto 1A, there's been so many. This is kind of interesting. If you're walking down Hampton Beach Boulevard, you'll notice the road matches with the sidewalk. All they do is, because they don't want to stop traffic, they just keep paving and paving and paving and paving to the point where the road and the sidewalk meet. Right? But the road's literally supposed to be like a foot below so that the water can drain and run off and you don't get these erosion problems and all that. Major reconstruction project on the 1A coming. I think we have a 10-year highway plan. All the roads that are going to be rebuilt in the next 10 years, barring weather, are in that 10-year plan. So you can see where we're going with our road infrastructure, and that's a big one. And then when there's a weather event, we always have the opportunity to shift money and take care of some of the issues. So I think on the infrastructure side, I think we're good. We're always going to have issues because we're a seacoast community, right? As the key for us is responding. If there's erosion, if a bridge washes out, if anything like that, how do we respond? And I think overall we do a very, very good job, actually. I don't know the specifics on the Exeter issue that you're talking about. I'll say this: Seabrook Nuclear Power Plants consistently ranked one of the safest nuclear power plants. I'm a big believer in nuclear power. I think there's a lot of opportunity with nuclear power, especially these you haven't seen them yet, but in the next 10 years, you're going to see some communities start doing these very tiny nuclear power plants. They're called small batch. It's a nuclear power plant that could fit in a room half this size. It's really, really interesting stuff. Supposedly super safe and all that, but again, we're going to have to go through the whole Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The state doesn't really manage nuclear issues, right? Those are all handled on a federal. Those are more federally driven issues. I'll just say when I've worked with Seabrook, our manager of Homeland Security, who works with Seabrook directly on their emergency systems, we've always had good results. I'm happy to look into what waivers they're looking for now. I'm happy to look at that, and I don't know if the state has input as to whether we challenge those or not. We had the false alarm a couple years ago. That stunk. That was really dumb. I know they were looking at getting rid of the sirens. They wanted all the alarms just to be on your phones. We said, no, we're not doing that. We're keeping the sirens. We're keeping the alarms. A guy literally hit the wrong button and the alarm went off. It was terrible. We just moved that button a little further to the right. We moved it away from the coffee. It just doesn't. So no, I think overall we handle it well, but I'm happy to look into the actual waivers. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Tina Solmarsh. I'm from Northampton.
Hi.
Hello, I am one of many volunteers and advocates for the National Breast Cancer Coalition. You may know my colleague Nancy Ryan. She's been here several times.
Yeah.
So as a reminder, New Hampshire has the third highest breast cancer incidence rate in the nation. And we advocate for and support the National Breast Cancer Coalition. So you talked about you leaving office, and you also talked about legacy. So I'm asking if you will urge the winner, number one, your successor, and then number two, the winner of the 2024 presidential election, to support the National Breast Cancer Coalition's priorities of adequate breast cancer research funding and access to quality health care for all.
Oh yeah.
And specifically, there's a metastatic breast cancer I think it's in the dear colleague letter stage, where there is a wait period for women with, or patients with metastatic breast cancer, that they have to wait for benefits that they qualify for, but often the wait period is after they've passed away.
Yeah. So I would just say, yeah. So the good news, the bad news is this. Let me take 3 steps back. I'm an environmental engineer. That was my thing. I did not plan on getting in politics. And my specialty was what they call chlorinated solvents in groundwater. That's what I did for 12 years. I drilled a lot of holes in the ground, and we looked for chlorinated solvents and chemicals in groundwater specifically. That is likely the leading cause of a lot of this. New Hampshire has a lot of radon too, and there's air issues with radon and how it can affect cancer and whether its true impact on breast cancer. But groundwater and our water sources, I believe, this is now just my personal belief, is a huge driver on cancer issues, breast cancer and others, childhood cancer. I've always said the most trusting, you really trust government when you turn on the faucet, fill it with water, and hand it to your kid. Think about it. You are really trusting that government did their job and is giving you clean water, because you can't see it, you can't smell it, and it's a lifetime of ingestion. So I did that for about 12 years. When I was doing it, back in my day, there was no PFAS. Well, there was, but we didn't know it. PFAS is you hear about PFAS a lot. We have a lot of it here in New Hampshire, but it's at such low levels. When I was an engineer, you couldn't detect it. We detect it in parts per trillion, which is 1 drop in 10,000 swimming pools. Think of that, or 100,000 swimming pools, right? If you have 1 drop of PFAS at 100, so that's the level we have to be able to detect it, and we can now, which is good. There are hotspots specifically with PFAS. You hear that all the time. There's a hotspot here at the Copley, near the Copley landfill. There's hotspots in Merrimack. Parts of the state are perfectly fine, but parts of the states are hotspots. I'll say we put about $400 million in the past few years just in clean water infrastructure, new pipes, community-based systems. A lot of folks, though, in New Hampshire are on wells, right? And that's where the arsenic and other chemicals get in. That's one of the biggest concerns. So the issues in New Hampshire, unfortunately, I think I don't want to say are here to stay, but because so many folks are on their own drinking water wells, and they've maybe tested them 20 years ago, but they don't keep up with the tests or the modern technology, I personally believe that's one of the challenges that we have. I'm not against people having a personal drinking water at home at all, but test your water, right? Know what you're getting, and report the results if and when you can. The good news on the next governor is this: there's a 95% chance the next governor is a woman, and they're not going to ignore how I don't think anybody has in recent history, nor the issues of breast cancer or cancer. That data is very real, and it's a very real issue with us. And again, I go back to the kids. It's especially prevalent for me in terms of what we're doing to protect kids. Because if you can catch stuff like this early, right? If you can catch whether it's early detection with cancer or making sure that they're not even ingesting the chemicals or whatever's causing this in the first place, that's really where you can, I think, have the biggest impact.
I have a question on portable health care, and it's based on my knowledge, which may or may not be accurate. But as I understand it, I can buy automobile insurance in any state and then move thereafter elsewhere, and that insurance will follow me.
Mm-hmm.
But with health care, again, as I understand it, you can't do that. You can't buy a policy in, say, Nebraska and then move elsewhere and have that follow you for health care. So why not, or can you buy a policy in Nebraska and we move here, and that policy will follow me in health care? I don't think you can. So my question, which is probably confused, which is probably like, may or may not be accurate, why not have some kind of a system where you can buy your health care insurance like auto insurance and then move elsewhere? And that is my question.
So you're not confused. You're absolutely right. you're spot on, and you should be able to do that. So I love the idea. I love the concept. I wish we could do it. I think a lot of us for certain reasons you can't, but I'll explain for a second. But here's the biggest problem. That is a symptom of the really big problem in America. There is no free market in healthcare. That's why the costs are so high. The government regulations, and government-controlled healthcare drive the costs on 90% of your healthcare costs. People want universal healthcare. They want everybody on Medicare is great. Medicare Part D is wonderful. But people want everybody on Medicare, but that's not necessarily the best plan for everybody. You should absolutely be able to buy a healthcare plan in another state and use it, just like automobile insurance. You should absolutely be able to buy a policy here in New Hampshire and use it in another state. By the way, because we have some of the lowest now, we used to be the highest, but now some of the lowest healthcare costs in the East, everybody would be buying it from us. All the health insurance companies would be moving to New Hampshire if you could do that. I think it would be great. But so much in healthcare is driven by government regulation, government money, government control. And that's just it. So even the private insurance companies are limited, and they are not allowed. They're simply not allowed to cross state lines. I think I don't want to get too technical, I think it's a whole violation of the Constitution and interstate commerce and all that sort of thing. I think I should be able to buy whatever I want from whatever state I want and use it. So it's a political issue more than anything. The best thing you can do to control your everyday costs in life, to control healthcare costs, would be to reinstate and get back to more of a free market of healthcare, right? Where good systems are rewarded and bad systems go away. But in government, too much of government, especially on the federal side, this is a federal issue, not a state issue, they defer to they're lazy. They're very lazy. They defer to the easiest way to do things. Medicare, the biggest concern you should all have, Medicare goes bankrupt in 9 years. There's no more Medicare money in 9 years, guys. Now, is anyone in the government talking about that or doing anything about it? No. Because the easiest thing to do for both these presidential candidates is not talk about it and let the next man or woman president in Congress deal with it. They constantly kick the can down the road until there is a crisis, and then they usually just make a bad decision. If you're making a decision in anything in life, if you're making that decision in a crisis moment in your business, your family, then you might be making a decision, but it's not the best solution, right? That's what government tends to do, and that's what's going on with healthcare in this country. Nobody wants to talk about Medicare going bankrupt because it is. No, I don't think anyone's going to let it go bankrupt, but somebody's going to pay, and it's going to really affect the economy. So if you want to lower prices and increase competition, we'd do exactly what you proposed. I would love it, but right now the federal government doesn't let us do it.
Well, suppose they did.
That'd be great.
Suppose somebody said, yeah, that's a good idea. Well, let's try it, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What would happen if the next president, or whoever
Yeah.
it may be, says, okay, that's what we're going to do, just like auto insurance. And Medicare is in trouble, as
Yeah.
we all know. Anyway.
See, what they would be able to do
I'm
is-
babbling on, I'll just-
No, they would be able to mix the risk, what they call the risk pools. The high-risk patients in other states could then get mixed with yours and ultimately lower the costs, and you're sharing more risk. And if we're all sharing more risk, costs go down. If in a small state like New Hampshire especially, you're asking, we only have 3 or 4 insurance companies because we have so few people to insure, right? So companies don't want to have a lot of people in their insurance pool to spread the risk out. So if our citizens can't share risk with other states, it really limits us, and theoretically would drive up the smaller states typically have higher healthcare costs. It's unfair. It's absolutely unfair. So I think it would be great. It would lower costs for everybody, from everything from a Tylenol to chemotherapy. Everything would go down. But the government doesn't allow it. They try to keep everything in a box under control. Very, very frustrating.
Over here.
Sure.
I think that's a little unfair. First, Medicare is fantastic.
I said that, yeah.
Absolutely fantastic.
It is
If I have a problem and I don't know how much it's gonna cost for a prescription, I call Medicare and they can tell me that if I get it from CVS, it's one thing, it's from Walmart, it's another.
Yeah.
They are infinitely better than the private health insurance. I mean, secondly, Affordable Care Act, ACA. Why isn't that available to everybody at all levels? That would be universal health care that he's talking about. And it works. And yet people fight against expanding it to make it available to everybody.
So you can go on the healthcare exchange right now. You can all buy it's called New Hampshire Healthy Families. That's our healthcare exchange. That's what our version of the Obamacare. When Obamacare was created, we had that. You can go on the website. You can go on the website and buy it now if you want. But no, Medicare is fantastic. It's wonderful. But again, Medicare is subsidized by trillions of dollars in the federal government, which is okay for that population. But if folks want a different version of healthcare, having the competition drives overall everybody's healthcare costs down. And that's what you want, right?
Hi, I was recently diagnosed with a rare disease and found out that insurance companies require the same data and support to pay for treatments regardless of whether your disease is rare or not. With a rare disease, the data's not there. So I'm sitting on $150,000 in denied treatment for only 4 treatments that I've had since early April. Where would you suggest I start to try and advocate for changing that policy?
Yeah. So 73% of our healthcare costs right now go to 20% of the population. And a lot of it's in rare diseases. The challenge we have with rare diseases is there's a lot of them, right? It's amazing. I do a rare disease day. I do days for all these different types of diseases to kind of bring awareness to it. And sometimes there's a pharmaceutical, a drug that someone's invested in that can help cure or manage those symptoms. But because so few people have it, the drug becomes insanely expensive, so you need the insurance companies. So here's the challenge. Insurance companies are ultimately afraid that you will buy their insurance policy, they'll treat your disease, and then, at a very high cost because the pharmaceutical is so expensive, and then ultimately you go away as a customer for some reason, you move away, just as this gentleman was talking about, you move away and you can't have that insurance plan anymore, and then they've paid all this money to help pay for your stuff to cure, but they don't get to recoup that cost back from you as a customer. So, on the rare disease stuff, I'm a firm believer that you're absolutely right. The government is very antiquated in terms of the information that we want to gather, because every disease is different, right? Every disease is different. So at the state level where we can have flexibility, we try to. I firmly believe that risk pool that I was talking about, if you can get the rare disease folks more integrated into a freer market of risk, then those costs come way down. And I believe that there are certain pharmaceuticals that, yes, the government should step up and say, for this one, we're going to subsidize this. And we do often, right, depending on the disease. There's hundreds of rare diseases. I'm going to ballpark this and say we provide additional subsidies for maybe 1/3 of them. It's not enough, but it's about 1/3 of them. So I don't know your situation, but I'm going to guess maybe you're not in that opportunity. Now, the 2 areas I would go, if you've talked to your insurance company and they're still denying, talk to the Department of Insurance here. Sometimes we can advocate. It can take a little time, but sometimes we can advocate to either get an extended a trial period. All right, we'll get it paid for the next 6 months, and then we'll see where it goes. Because what we try to do sometimes is say, okay, these pharmaceuticals, these very rare pharmaceuticals, hopefully they go down in cost over time. So we'll help you pay for the first year, 6 months, 18 months, until hopefully the costs go down. The pharmaceutical maker has recouped enough money so they're dropping the costs on you, and it becomes more affordable for you into the long term. But talk to the Department of Insurance. I don't know your specific rare disease. Another thing I'm a big proponent of is called the right to try. Some people like this, some people don't, for various reasons. But right to try says, as an individual, you have the right to try an experimental drug, whether the government says it's okay or not. Maybe it's not fully FDA certified or whatever it is, but you have an individual have the opportunity to go to that, you're going to take all the risks on it, but you have the right to try something if that's what you want to do. Some people like that, some people don't for various reasons. Sometimes it's been very successful, other times maybe not. So if that creates a little more flexibility in there to get people on with rare diseases, trying some of these pharmaceuticals a little earlier on, there's opportunity there. But again, I'm not telling anyone to be a guinea pig and all that kind of stuff. It's on the individual. It shouldn't be on the government telling you to do it. It really should be on the individual. But it's very challenging. And again, I would ask you to probably contact the Department of Insurance, and if there's an opportunity there, those are the guys that really know. They can talk directly to the insurance company for you, get a better understanding of how many other individuals you might be dealing with, and seeing if there's a better way to mix you into that risk pool to lower those costs. And maybe even subsidize it up front.
We have time for 2 more questions. There's one in the back.
You guys are asking a lot of technical questions today. I haven't heard that, we haven't said the B word or the T word yet. That's great.
Good morning. I have a follow-up to the first question that you're asked about housing.
Yeah.
So I'm on the board of Stay Work Play.
Yep.
For those who don't know, our goal is to attract and retain young professionals in the state of New Hampshire. And also specifically, I'm on the Catapult Seacoast Board to do the same thing right here in the greater Seacoast. For those who don't know, our population in the state of 20 to 40-year-olds, or 20 to 39, is only 25% of the population. So while we need that workforce, we're pretty limited in that age bracket. I'm 36, born and raised right here in New Hampshire, also a renter. So while we are putting more effort into these multifamily homes, there's still the biggest issue for young professionals from local data, even just taken from this past year. Number 1 concern is affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's all these multifamily units going in, they're still not affordable. So what is the state doing to really monitor the cost? Because these apartments are more than our parents pay for houses.
Yeah, so the units, the $100 million that I put up in Invest in Age, it has to have affordable housing. It's not for market rate housing. So the money that we put up is only on the affordable workforce housing side. So if a private developer wants to build more units at what they call market rate, which is typically higher, that's on them. But what we're doing, I mean, I'm going to pat myself on the back here. No other governor in history has invested in housing in terms of actually putting a Invest in Age $100 million program. The sole purpose of this is here. New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, when I became governor, got $5 million a year. Now it gets $25 million a year. But it all has to go to affordable housing units. So that's the balance, because you need that spectrum. Now, I will also say, when you build a market rate unit, government doesn't do it, but if the developer builds a market rate unit, that's not the worst thing in the world, because you also need mobility, right? You need young people in the middle, as you get to the 40s, being able to keep moving up, right? Not everything can be a starter unit. But I can just tell you the $100 million we spent all goes to the affordable housing side. It has created, I think last year we doubled the number of multifamily permits in the house, in the state. That's awesome. We doubled it, right? But only on the affordable side. And then for example, you get an apartment building of 100 units. The state gives them $5 million. Well, our $5 million went to the affordable units there. Some of those units might be more expensive on the market rate side, but we don't pay for that. That's on the developer. So that's all. I just think that whatever the state puts in should be on the affordable side, and most people, I think, agree with that. So, we can do more. I think it's great to do more. The New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority is actually a really good group. They have a lot of opportunity, I think, and they have done a pretty good job of, again, spreading out housing, both on the seniors, veterans, young people. I mean, you're right, we only have 25% of that age bracket you talked about. It's growing, that's good news, but it went from like 24 to 25%. Maine and Vermont, they're gone. Young people have left Maine and Vermont in droves. It's really, really difficult. That's why businesses aren't going there. And that's too bad. I mean, we want Maine and Vermont to do well, but you gotta have the right mix of all this stuff, to your point. What else you got? Biden and Trump. There you go. We were doing so well without them. Is that a question? I don't know.
Oh, that's one of your thoughts.
Well, yeah, so what are my thoughts on the whole presidential thing? All right, yeah, let's end on that. It's unfortunate, right? Both parties got what they asked for, right? So I'll say this, as much as 70% of America doesn't want Biden and Trump, didn't want Biden and Trump on the ballot, at least with Republicans, Democrats didn't really have much of a choice, but on the Republican side, this is what the Republicans voted for. As everyone knows, I worked very, very hard for Nikki Haley. I tried to get Nikki in there. But, the voters voted. I I think she went all the way through the Super Tuesday, so the majority of states actually voted, and that's who the Republicans picked. On the Democrat side, not so much. Remember, Biden tried to skip the New Hampshire primary and not actually have primaries, and there was no real competition. And there was a warning out there. I'm not going to go too far in this, but a year ago, I was on CNN saying Biden is going to be off this ticket when people realize what is going on. Now, I will personally tell you, every interaction I've had with President Biden has been very good. Not very good, but fine. I saw him at the airport about 2 months ago. He was spot on. He was. Came down, we made a couple jokes, had a nice conversation. Well, fine. The problem is this, and I'm not trying to just pick on Biden, but I think the problem that everyone is realizing is Biden is not a candidate for president. He's the president. We could have a terrorist action today. We could have something that needs very critical, in the moment decision-making today. And it's a 24/7 job. Being governor is 24/7. Being president is really 24/7, right? It drives me crazy when anyone plays golf, by the way. Any governor or president playing golf blows my mind, because I'm like, how do you have time to do that? It drives me crazy. I'm actually starting to play golf as I'm leaving. But anyway, because it is a 24/7 job. And I think that's where a lot of folks are getting concerned. They're realizing, okay, after the debate performance, if you can't be up for a debate, which is your big A game, this is your moment. If you can't get it together for that, that's disconcerting. And I think, I'll say this on the last thing I'll say, and then I'll pick on Trump, because I pick on everybody equally. Sort of. I think the most concerning thing on the Biden issue is this. If you watch national media, which is a joke, by the way. I'm on national media, it's pretty much a joke. But if you watch, because it's all biased. Fox and Newsmax are way to the right, CNN and MSNBC are way to the left. Everyone has their biases. It's just the way it is now. Even ABC and NBC have their political biases, of course. I think a lot of folks in the Democrat Party and base have been told Biden's fine, Biden's fine, Biden's fine. But when given a moment, when given a job interview, right? That's what a debate is. A debate is the open job interview that everybody can watch. It's not a pre-recorded ad, there's no teleprompter. And when given that one moment, everyone went, oh my God, this is serious, very serious. So I think aside from him being a candidate going forward, I think people, my sense is people were pretty upset because they're like, well, why haven't you told us this a little more openly about how serious the situation is? I feel very bad for Joe Biden, and I mean that very personally. Take the politics aside, I feel very bad for him. I think he's been told by a very tight inner circle, he's fine, just keep going. I don't think he's being given good information and good outside. The best thing, when you're a leader, you're in a bubble, right? You need outside perspective. He's not getting fair and honest outside perspective and hasn't been. And now all of a sudden he's getting this outside perspective and he's going, wait, what's going on? What do you mean? So I don't blame him as much as the people around him, the administration, the media, the Democrat Party for not allowing a primary to take place. I'm not saying to him, hey, you did a great job. From a Democrat's perspective, you got rid of Trump. Thank you. That should have been his legacy. Instead, his legacy is likely going to be the guy who gives it back to Trump, whether you agree with that or not. They'll figure that out. I don't think they can get rid of him. He's not going on his own right now. They only have a month. And what's interesting is the Republican convention happens next week. The Democrat convention doesn't happen until late August. So if the Democrats try to do something, they still have a month to do it. The only answer is Kamala Harris. They would have to give it to Kamala. And she doesn't poll any better than Biden does. So they're in a pickle. But they created their pickle. A lot of us tried to yell, scream, you got a problem here. Find somebody else. On the Republican side, we picked Trump. And it wasn't my first choice. It wasn't my second choice. It wasn't my third, fourth, fifth, sixth, or seventh choice. I think there were 13 candidates in the race. And let's just say, he hit the baker's dozen mark. But he's our guy. So, I think there was a lot of hope that these trials, we haven't even talked about the trials. Remember those trials he was in? No one's even mentioning that over the last month, right? But even when we were talking about that, people don't like it. They don't like January 6th. It was awful. They don't like the election denial. It was absolutely awful. But for a lot of folks, it's just not a disqualifier. They hate it. They're not his choice. But it's not a disqualifier. So that's it. And elections are about choices. When you go into the ballot booth, when you go into the voting booth, there's no debate. There's no gray area. There's no, I'm going to vote for this guy, but I don't like. But everyone is going to have to, in some form, hold their nose and pick one of these two individuals. And everyone's going to hold their nose. There'll be a couple zealots on the right and a couple zealots on the left, but us, the 85% of us, in some form, are going to hold our nose and either vote for Trump or vote for Biden. And that stinks. But know this, democracy's fine. And you know the proof? You're going to pick the next president. That's it. Right? That's what democracy is. You get to vote. And the votes will be counted, and there'll be challenges and recounts and all that, but the winner will win. That is my security, that democracy is fine, guys. Because at the end of the day, let me take a step back. Last summer, I've gotten to know George W. Bush, the second Bush. I didn't know him at all when he was president, even when I was governor, a whole lot. But in the last couple of years, I've spent a little time with him. He's a really fascinating guy. And obviously, I'm a huge fan of his father, who passed away. But he said something to me. I got an opportunity to sit with him at Kennebunkport, and that was amazing. And him and Laura, and we were chatting about a lot of things. And we talked about this issue of democracy, and where's the country going, and is it all doomed, right? Sometimes you wake up and you go, oh my God, it's all falling apart, this country's doomed. It's not. And he said something to me very poignant. He said, look in our recent history, because America's really young, by the way, right? We went through a civil war. Civil war tore this country apart. Our institutions stood strong. We still have our bicameral legislature. We have an independently elected president. We have our governors. We have states' rights and states' freedoms. We have an independent court. The whole 9 yards. Our institutions stood strong. Could have been torn apart. We went through World War II. Think of the 1960s. Guys, we saw Martin Luther King Jr., John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy assassinated. The great voices of this country were shot, right? And before our eyes. I mean, it's awful. And people said it's over. The country's going to hell, like it's all over. It's not. Our institutions stood strong. And we got through it. We went through racial divide. And then there was racial peace, and now we're going through racial divide again, right? But our institutions are standing strong. You might not agree with the policies. I don't agree with all the policies. I don't agree with all the decisions. But the institutions stood strong. We went through 9/11. We went through a pandemic. Have we fundamentally changed our? No. Because at the end of the day, when you vote, that's all that matters. You pick the leadership. Again, we can complain that 70% of us don't want Biden or Trump, but we voted for that. We voted for that ticket. It wasn't like a backdoor thing. Not really on the Democrat side, but it really wasn't. I mean, at the end of the day, you guys, we all choose who the leadership is. You're going to choose who the next governor is. Not me and the governor and the establishment, the elite. You go to that voting booth, and especially in New Hampshire, we get it right every time. We count the votes. You choose who your selectmen are, your planning board, and I would argue your selectmen, planning board, and school board have way more impact on your lives than the governor and definitely the president, right? Because local control is so important. So you might not like the policies. You might not like what comes out of the Supreme Court. A lot of Democrats don't like the Supreme Court today. Guess what? I couldn't stand the Supreme Court for 10 years, their decisions. I honored those decisions. That's fine. A very liberal court for a while, and it was a more conservative court. And eventually it'll be a more of a liberal court. And that's the system. It kind of goes back and forth. People, I complain so much about Congress that they do nothing but raise money. I think Congress is a joke. But the gridlock you see sometimes, people say, oh, they can't pass anything. As long as they're trying to pass something, I'm not complaining. It's when they're not even trying that I get frustrated. But when they don't pass something, that's okay. It's not gridlock, it's checks and balances. It means they got to go back and work it better. The problem is now they're so polarized, there's no incentive to work across the party aisle. We have it here in New Hampshire. You know, in New Hampshire, our House of Representatives is 201 Republicans to 199 Democrats. And people, if this was Washington, they'd say you're never going to pass anything, right? You'll never get anything done. You know we passed our budget unanimously on the first vote? Unanimously. Because everybody got a little something and we had to not accept everything we wanted, we worked it out. So the system works fundamentally, it does. You might not like the results today, but you go vote, right? If you're really scared about Donald Trump, go vote for Biden, I don't care. If you're really scared about Joe Biden not having cognitive abilities in moments of crisis, and I'm concerned about that, Go vote for Trump. But it's your vote. And that's why democracy is going to be fine. We go through tough times. We go through bad policies. We become more conservative. We become more socialist, whatever it is. But that's what America was designed. The founding fathers, as we say in New Hampshire, were wicked smart. They were incredible. Do you know we're one of the only countries on the planet, only democratic countries on the planet that elect our president separate from Congress? Right? British Parliament effectively elects the Prime Minister. Most other democracies, their parliament decides who the real decision maker is going to be. We don't do that. It's independent. That's why our country's actually so strong. Other countries think we're crazy. They go, what do you mean the president might not agree with Congress? Darn right the president might not agree with Congress. That's okay. Our institutions were designed so well and so much better than everybody else's. As frustrated as we all might be with policy and personality and individuals, the institutions do stand strong over 250 years. Just look back, 250 years, right? We're doing really well. Doesn't mean you don't take your eye off the ball. But believe me, we got it. We got the system down here. We don't get the best results. We don't get what we want. But overall, the collective we picks those leaders. And I'm a big believer. Why aren't I running again? Because you got to have turnover, right? We need term limits in Congress. I think in New Hampshire we have an understanding of that discipline, local control, but this ain't a career, right? This is a service, and you move on at some point. I think if Washington had more of that sense, you would get back to some policies that we all generally agree with a little better. But that's more personality driven. I think there's campaign finance reform problems in there. So if you want to fix campaign finance reform where folks aren't spending all their time raising money and getting reelected, fine, you can fix that. But that doesn't mean democracy isn't working, right? You still vote. You still decide the leadership. So again, I've had this rattling in my head. I don't just see everything with rose-colored glasses. I'm the governor. I deal with hard issues every day. I deal with the federal government every day. I deal with New Hampshire and local issues, all of it. And one thing I've convinced myself, and I believe very securely, and the reason I started with, no matter what happens, the sun's coming up tomorrow, right? And to be in a place like New Hampshire, that while we're in this great, awesome experiment called America, I'm sorry, I think we're blessed. I think California is this wonderful place. But believe me, none of you want to live in California. I mean, it's really bad. Everyone's leaving there. I lived there for 3 years. I lived in San Francisco for 3 years. Beautiful city, amazing food. A little expensive, but it was okay. And they had a homelessness problem at the time. This was 20 plus years ago. I went back there recently, twice. And I don't get too emotional. My job, especially post-COVID, nothing really rattles me. I've gone through hell and back, fire and back. But I literally got very emotional walking through the old neighborhoods I used to work in. It was open-air drug dens, the poverty, the homelessness, no sense of control, no sense of anything. Because in the name of social justice, we're not going to get these people off the street and get them better opportunity. I thought that was a travesty in San Francisco. Then I went to LA. Can I tell you, I know I'm going on too long, but I'm the governor. I'm not coming back next year. I'll tell you a story. I was on the show Bill Maher. You guys ever see the show Bill Maher? So I was on the Bill Maher show, and he said to me, we were talking about the homelessness crisis in California. And he said, have you been down to Skid Row? I was in LA. I said, Skid Row? What are you talking about? What's Skid Row? He said, oh, that's where all the homelessness are in Los Angeles. You should go there. I said, Bill, you're treating it like a tourist attraction. I mean, really. 10,000 homelessness in Los Angeles, and I went. At one point, the security stopped us. They said, we're not, Governor, we're not letting you go down there. And I kind of pushed my way through a little bit, and I could see why. It was just homelessness, lawlessness, drugs everywhere, needles. I mean, it was awful. Where was the leadership? Where was the solution? And I'll get a little political, and that's why I pick on Gavin Newsom so much. There's no Republican policy that created that, right? So the liberal policies, the Democrats, they say, we care about people, we care about the homeless, we care about low-income families. No, you don't. Not out there, they don't. And I got really emotional, and I got really angry. Gavin's kind of a nice guy, but I've been pretty hard on him in the press. Because if you're in California, you should demand more. He gets away with it, with no accountability. So, the reason I say, I bring all of this up, we have in this country has a lot of problems. And I'm not saying just be lucky that you're here in New Hampshire with Governor Sununu, but be lucky that you're here in New Hampshire with a little bit of that live free or die spirit, where you guys really have a lot of say in your local control, and ultimately your lives. And nationally, as frustrating as it can be nationally, the Biden and Trump thing, no matter who gets elected, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. You know why? Because we've had Trump for 4 years, we've had Biden for 4 years. Certain parts weren't pleasant, certain policies weren't great, but we got through it, and we'll get through it again. Neither of them are great answers, but we're gonna get through it. As long as we adhere to, I think, remember what really impacts our day-to-day lives. And that's, I think, the ability for A, for us to vote, and B, to really appreciate that live free or die thing, that local control thing, where you are way more important than the government. Stop letting people from the government tell you that they're more important, they're gonna dictate a better path for your life. You're gonna do that. And we're gonna create as many opportunities as we can for you. Thank you guys very much. I didn't mean to go off so hard.